Kingsman: The Golden Circle opens in theaters this weekend. Is it a golden ticket movie?
Should you circle around the parking lot of your local multiplex to see it?
Is it a knighted royal piece of theatrical experience?
Should you go see it with the men in your life?
Those are our quips, and this is our review. I'm Roth Cornet.
I'm Joe Starr.
Kingsman is opening. Those are our quips, and we're missing Dan right now because he is the punster.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be your Walmart Great Value Dan Merle for the day. He is on a well-deserved vacation. Hi, Dan Merle.
Hi, Dan Merle. So Kingsman, the sequel. Now, Matthew Vaughn has traditionally, though he has done films that are in an already established franchise, he's actually been a little resistant to follow up on his own films, but he did with this one, which had me pretty excited because if he was on board, why wouldn't I be on board? What did you think? Do you think it lived up to the promise?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to live up to the promise of the first Kingsman movie because the promise of the first Kingsman movie was that there was no promise.
Exactly.
It was just like, what is this thing? And everyone saw it by accident and kind of had their minds blown. And so it's hard to live up to the promise of no promise now that there's some promise. But I had a lot of fun with this movie. It will not change cinema, and a lot of people I think will leave it going, the first one was better, and it is because it's hard to compare anything to the first one. But I had a really good time overall with this movie, and that's kind of what was important to me. I didn't leave being like, well, that was a waste.
Not at all, and it's certainly one of those things that I agree, particularly when a movie is a surprise. I think Guardians faced this as well. When it comes out and it's something that we're not really expecting much of, and then it delivers a great film that we all really enjoy, then when the second one comes out, then we've got sort of our expectations up, and we're sort of like, well, what are you gonna do now? I kind of feel like that must be what it's like for you as a comedian. Like, make me laugh, buddy, you know, which is why I would never do it.
I've seen you before. Let's see if you can do it again.
But that's sort of the barrier that this film has to cross over. And I a little bit think that it's possible that audiences will respond better to this one than critics do. Because I think so critics will have those high expectations, and critics will say, well, it doesn't quite match what the original did. It cannot. Yeah, and it doesn't. The original is in many ways a better movie, not just because it's a fresh movie, but because it's a film that establishes those bonds. It is a film that has a villain that's got, whether you like the performance or not, and that's sort of controversial, it's got a villain that's got an interesting motivation that keeps you engaged, and it's introducing you to this world. A little bit like John Wick, right?
Sure.
In terms of it's introducing you to this whole world. And now you're just getting to know it a little better. And of course, there's the inclusion of the statesmen, their American counterparts in the film.
Now, what I think this movie did a good job with, just like in John Wick 2, where John Wick 2 now has to expand the world, I think this movie did a good job of expanding the world in interesting ways. They didn't just expand it and go, look, there's more stuff. They did a pretty good job, I think, of trying to expand it organically and from points of view that makes sense. They tried to expand it in ways that would affect characters and help characters grow and move forward instead of just sort of making it big for the sake of making it bigger. It is bigger. It's a lot bigger. It's a lot weirder. If you love just the weirdness of the end of the first Kingsman with fireworks shooting out of people,
and who doesn't?
Then I don't think you'll have a problem with how weird this movie gets. There were a few times watching it where I had to kind of check in and go, is that too much?
Nah,
it's not too much.
Great.
This is fine. It's fine. I feel like I'm putting a whole bunch of asterisks on this movie.
Asteri.
Yeah, so many, just a flurry of asteri. Bottom line, I recommend this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think you should see it opening weekend. See it with an energetic crowd. You have no control over the crowd that you see it with, but I hope you get a very energetic, laughy, clappy crowd, because that's the way to see this movie.
I agree. I will say these are the things that I think the movie does very well, like the Bond of yore. This has really big villains that are larger than life. They have this particular villain. Like I said, I love her, and she's great. It's a fun portrayal. It's an interesting premise, but it doesn't quite have the weight and the twist of the villain villain, and it hits sort of generic spy action beats a little bit more than the last one did. But it feels fun. It feels lively. I miss those big wacky Bond villains and action sequences. What he does very, very well is these action sequences are innovative, they are funny, they are engaging, they will keep you tuned in. There are some really fun surprises and a great turn that they've managed to keep out of the marketing that I hope is a surprise for you guys as well, because it's really one of my favorite parts of the movie, is a total surprise as well. And the other thing is that he casts really wonderful actors, so these are strong performances. And what I liked a lot too is that Eggsy, there's a sweetness to him and his relationships. There is a grounded sense of reality and sweetness to the relationships that I really enjoyed in the midst of this wild, wacky, larger-than-life spy movie.
Oh, that's something I came out really enjoying. Where the first movie subverted Bond tropes sort of on a surface level. Like, he drinks funny, let's make fun of Bond for weird drinks and odd job villains and stuff like that. This movie subverts Bond tropes on more of a character level. Eggsy is the anti-Bond in every sense of the word, in the way he builds close ties and the way that he treats women. He's a much different Bond, and I thought that was interesting that they actually really started digging deeper into picking apart Bond than just that man has a funny arm.
Yeah, that is absolutely right, because it plays with and against those expectations, right? So it does have villains that have sort of funny, odd appendagi, and it does have a villain in Julianne Moore who is quippy and funny and quirky and weird, which is great and really enjoyable. But to your point, the central Bond character, Eggsy, he does the exact opposite of what Bond would do. He does feel emotion. He does engage. He is intimately relating with women. It's really fun and interesting to watch. I liked the addition of the statesman, although it played out a little bit differently than I thought it would. And it's okay, because what it means is that the relationships that you already have established deepen in this film.
Yes.
And it plays on the Britishness of them even more than the Americanness of the statesman.
Yeah, and I think if you're concerned that this feels like a sequel where they just added 11 new main characters and that it's going to get weighed down, the addition of the statesman is done well, and it's done smartly. I didn't want to say the word smartly.
Smartly.
You know what? Look, most of this movie is set in my home state of Kentucky, so I will say smartly. Matthew Vaughn did some really brainful stuff in bringing the statesman to life. It was actually nice seeing the Louisville skyline in the background of a few shots. I was like, oh, my city. But he does a really good job managing these characters. He's not just plunking 15 new characters for the sake of making this thing bigger. One thing I really enjoy about Matthew Vaughn, and this isn't necessarily a thinking person's movie, but something I found myself really kind of paying attention to is, you mentioned that the villain and some of the plot is a little more shallow than the first movie. Something interesting to me about what Matthew Vaughn did with Kingsman 2 is he almost seems hyper aware of it. And so in scenes in the movie, non-spoiler reviews are tough.
Non-spoilers reviews are tough. There's a lot that we're holding back here.
But there's a lot where it almost seems Matthew Vaughn is like, yeah, I know that's kind of shallow, so we're gonna kind of swing through. I'm gonna give you just enough so that there's a thing, but we're not gonna worry about the thing because let's just zip on by. So it's interesting that he seems aware when things are shallow or a little thin, and pads and supplements to kind of just keep you moving and keep you moving past it so that you notice it, but it doesn't weigh the movie down.
Exactly. I think he uses his brains.
He really does. He uses his thunker.
He's got big brains and he understands the genre. And do you like my southern accent, or is it offensive to you a little bit?
No, I mean, it's not really Kentucky, but it's fine.
It's not quite Kentucky, but that's because my family's from Tennessee.
Hi.
And so I feel like he uses his brains and he's like making fun of Americans in a way that doesn't really totally resonate, but that's okay.
I hear you. Go Preds.
Yeah, because it's like super super caricaturish, but he understands a spy movie real well. I'm going to stop this right now. He understands the tropes of the spy movie so well that when he knows he's hitting on one that we may sort of like shrug and roll our eyes at, he just quickly gets off of that and onto a really fun action sequence. You know, he's like, I know, we just had to do that to get you here to this fight scene, but check this out.
And he is so often, here's another thing I like about Vaughn, especially in this movie, is he's not someone who you expect to be like I don't expect a Baby Driver out of Matthew Vaughn, where it's like, look at this grand experiment in expert filmmaking. But Matthew Vaughn consistently in his action scenes does things that I feel like I haven't seen in a movie before.
Yeah.
And maybe he's just good at tricking me, and it's, you know, it's stuff that anyone who went to film school would be like, ugh, Joe, that's the old Spielberg Kobayashi Maru. And maybe I'm just a dummy and don't know. But he keeps everything moving very fresh. But he also balances really well with anytime I'm like, oh my God, how did you move a camera like that? He doesn't dwell on it. Matthew Vaughn never hits pause to be like, appreciate what I just gave to you.
I think whether he's sort of playing on action sequences that have been done in the past or not, it really doesn't matter, because like we're saying, even if you look at something like the casting of Halle Berry, he cast a Bond girl as Q.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whatever he's he's coming at it in a way where he's informed about the decisions that he's making. And I think what I appreciate about his action sequences is that for the most part, they're not unmotivated. They're not just action sequences for action sequences' sake. They are motivated. There's one that's quite actually emotional, and it's executed beautifully. And then there's many that are just straight up funny, and they have a sense of humor about themselves, and they understand the talent that they're using. He's playing both with and against your expectations of the talent as much as he's doing that with the genre. So having said all of that, this movie is very long. It's 2.5 hours long.
It is a long movie.
It feels a little bit overlong. It does not have the ability, nor would it, I think it'd be very difficult to sort of hit the surprise and the freshness of that first film. I don't think it's quite as good as the first film, but I think it does deepen those characters. It is a fun movie to watch. It is engaging, and I would recommend you see it in the theaters.
Yeah, he does again, there's a big balance here of, you know, in a G.I. Joe movie, let's say, there's so many ridiculous toys and absurd things that it never really feels like there's stakes because you feel like you're watching a cartoon. Matthew Vaughn has given you a crazy cartoon world that also somehow still feels grounded, and I still feel like I could lose the people that I've invested in at any minute. Yeah, I don't know. This is a lot of people might not like this movie because, again, I don't like saying that it's not as good as the first one necessarily, because the first one was just its own weird beast, and there's so much of it came out of nowhere wrapped up in how much I like the first Kingsman that it's almost unfair to me to kind of compare the two. But a lot of people will go, I don't think it was as good as the first one. It's a little long and it has its problems. I don't want to come off as being the guy who's like, no man, this was dope. But like it's a little long and it had problems, but to Matthew Vaughn's credit, they didn't bother me enough to make me sit back in my seat and shrug.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. This is a review that we're not doing grades, you know, but this is an enjoyable popcorn film.
I think you should see it.
That I think is worth, if you were a fan of the original, is worth seeing in the theater this weekend. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you see the film, if you don't, probably will not go down as an Oscar contender this year.
Probably not, but you know what? Tom Benedict Arnold, an actor who is not a household name, I don't think, plays a goon in this movie, and he deserves an Oscar.
Yeah.
He deserves an Oscar.
I know the one that you're talking about. All of the performances are quite good, as a matter of fact. Let us know what you think in the comments below. You can talk to us on Twitter. I'm at Roth Cornet.
I'm Joe Starr.
You can talk to us at SJ News as well, and we will see you quipping. Do you have any final quip?
Oh, man.
Quip pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure with the quip.
Nah, I got nothing.
Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.